Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Compass Webisode 5. I'm Seth Larner, one of the partners here at Compass, and I'm actually really happy to have Allison Cohen with us, who's an ERISA attorney who specializes in ERISA. And so one thing we want to talk about, we usually do these once a quarter. We just did one a couple of weeks ago on Schedule H audits, but we wanted to really bring this topic very quickly up because the government just passed Secure Act 2.0. And we've been getting a lot of questions on this and how some of these new regulations are going to change and what we're going to do to administer these plans with these new upcoming changes. But we thought it would be best to have Allison speak about all these changes and some of the complications that will probably happen with them. So with this, I want to pass off to Allison, and we'll get started right away.
Thank you, Seth. So essentially, yes, I'm the big nerd on the call today. There is a lot of material that we're going to be covering today. Not everything we're going to be able to do as deep of a dive, but keep in mind, we also don't know a lot at this point. We just know, for those of you who wondered what I did for my Christmas vacation, I read 350 pages of legislation. And then for fun, when it got signed on December 29th, I read it again for New Year's because that's just who I am. So we're going to cover today just a general overview and the timing of amendments, what it means in terms of guidance, when you're going to start hearing more details about some of these issues. And then rather than try to cram 350 pages of legislation, many of which the provisions aren't effective until 2025 or 2026, we focused on what is really more current for the plans. And if you're thinking of a new plan, what sort of things do you have to keep in mind? So we're focusing more on the things that are applicable for us more immediately. So the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which is just not as sexy as Secure 2.0, is the name of the big bill itself. And the president signed it on the 29th while he was down vacationing in the warm islands. I was jealous. And within that massive 4,000-page act, there's 350 pages of it, Division T, which is called Secure 2.0. It has these different titles. Now, here's what's interesting. The name was actually highly debated for quite some period of time. At one point, one of the Senate bills that became Secure 2.0 was called the Rise and Shine Act. And yes, they trapped interns in a room with a whiteboard and those little smelly markers and said, you're not allowed to come out until you come out with a cute name. And so thank God they just went with Secure 2.0 because Rise and Shine Act would make me a little nauseous. So here's what we have. Anything that we do is going to have to be put into writing in 2025. Why 2025? Because this is massive. There's a lot of pieces here. The IRS and the Department of Labor have to issue a tremendous amount of guidance and language and questions that are still pending. When Secure 1.0 was passed, for those of you that recall, in December of 2019, it was also a pretty massive piece of legislation, and we are still waiting on guidance of several issues, and that was 3 years ago. So this being passed in 2022, if it took them over 3 years, possibly 4 years to give us guidance on Secure 1.0, odds are we're not going to have what we need. So one of the things that's built in is that the IRS can also grant a later deadline. So if the IRS does not get enough guidance out to us, it can give itself an extension. My guess is there probably will be some sort of extension. What do you need to know and why do you care about this? You're like, I'm not writing the amendment. I don't care. What you care about is during this time where you don't have to have an amendment in place, you need to keep meticulous records as to what elections you have done so that when the amendment time comes, you know exactly what you elected. For example, within this amendment window is also the CARES and the original Secure 1.0. So when you're talking with your clients, or if you're a plan sponsor, when you are keeping records, did you elect to allow for the RMD waivers in 2020? Did you elect the original QBAD, which is the Qualified Birth and Adoption? Did you allow for the extended amounts of loans during CARES? Did you allow for the extra distributions? So you need to start keeping very detailed records as to what sort of amendments you have adopted, even though you have not adopted it on paper, so that when 2025 rolls around or later, you know exactly how you're going to be able to put that in writing. So very important. If you are thinking of terminating your plan, so if or your client is terminating a plan, this is one of the stupid rules the IRS has, is that you have to update the terminated plan for anything that has occurred in legislation. The interesting part of that is, so that means that I have to, if I terminate a plan today, I have to update that plan for Secure 1.0, CARES, taxpayer, and Secure 2.0. But I don't have language yet. The good news is the document vendors are going to put together what's called a good faith amendment. The service typically accepts such good faith amendments. I still think it's a stupid rule. You know, you don't have to polish the fingernails of a corpse that you're putting in the ground, but this is what you have to do. So keep in mind, terminating plans do need to be updated with a snap-on amendment incorporating all these changes. So what is effective? I wanted to give you a nice clean list as to what had an effective date as of this year. And this is kind of a list. And we're going to go through some of these in detail in the rest of the slides because we think it's important information for you to know about. If you want to rely on employee hardship certification, I'm not going to read the list to you. But these are the sorts of things. This is it. This is all that was effective as of 2023. Not a very big list for 350 pages of legislation. When you move forward into 2024, now we have a bigger list. So we have student loan repayments, which we are going to talk about. We're going to talk about the long-term part-time. That's what LTPT stands for. That came to us during Secure 1.0. So there are a lot of things here that we are going to discuss during the course of this. But again, most of this, we are going to need to get some legislation in order to update it. What do we have after 2024? So the things that are 2025, 2026, 2027, we have all sorts of other additional provisions that are going to kick in. But again, because these are so far out into the future, we are not going to really spend a whole lot of time on some of this part of the legislation. Okay, so for current plans, what things do you need to know about? We are going to talk about mandatory automatic enrollment. That kicks in 2025. So even though this is way off in the future, there are reasons we're talking about it today. So the IRS and the DOL have done a number of studies, and they have proven that automatic enrollment is a successful feature. There are many people on the phone who are rolling their eyes and groaning right now because they also say, yes, but it is a pain in the patootie. I get that. I understand that. But at the end of the day, it absolutely is clear that this is how some people need to be forced into savings. And by giving them savings means that they're going to be able to retire with dignity. So automatic enrollment is now going to be a mandatory feature. Don't panic yet. I will show you the exceptions. You're going to have a first year amount of 3 to 10%, and you're going to have mandatory auto increase. Let me get to the exceptions so people don't panic. If you are a plan that was established before 12/29/2022, this does not apply to you. Now, here's the big question that a lot of people are throwing out there. If this provision isn't effective until 1/1/2025 or later, why is it that it's plans established before 12/29/2022? This may be one of those things where it's going to come as a shock. Congress may not have thought through the language, and this may be a technical correction that's going to have to be done. Because otherwise, let's say I start a brand new plan in 2023. I do not include auto enrollment. Why? Because if we take a look at the prior slide, It is not effective until plan years after 2024. So I start a plan in 2023, but I don't have to comply with this until 2025. And yet, according to this, I would not be exempt and I'd have to have auto enroll. Well, I can't retroactively go back and have auto enroll. So this is maybe something that they're going to have to figure out exactly how that's supposed to work with a time space continuum. It happens, folks. It does. There are also exemptions for things for teeny employers. So if you normally employ fewer than 11 employees, if you're just a small little mom and pop business, you may be able to not have to deal with this at all. If you go over that limit, they do already build in a grace period before you have to go ahead and add auto enroll. They also give an exemption for new businesses. So new businesses are exempt for the first 3 years of existence, which means, we're giving you a chance to get your sea legs, to figure out what's going on, before we're going to saddle this with you. And of course, governments never want to follow their own rules. So governmental plans are exempt, church plans are exempt. We don't have to worry about those. And simple 401k plans are exempt. So we have all kinds of interesting stuff there. Now, there are some people who thought, I'm going to be clever and sneaky because in the early drafts, this was not included. And what this says is if you join a multiple employer or a pooled employer plan, a MEP or a PEP, some people thought they'd be sneaky. Again, it wasn't in the first version of the Senate bill. And as a result, people were saying, I can just join a MEP and then I'm not going to have to worry about this auto enroll thing because the MEP was already in place prior to the effective date. Haha, super clever. They fixed that. That is actually one technical correction that they did catch before the final bill. So if you join a MEP or a PEP, you're going to be subject to the auto enroll provisions in 2025. So we are going to have to get folks on there. If the MEP is established in 2025 and a brand new entity decides to join on in 2026, if you remember, one of the exemptions is I'm a new corporation. So that particular adopting employer may be exempt until 2029 because of the 3-year window. This is going to be a nightmare to track. And so you're going to need to make sure that your service provider is equipped to do so if you are involved in any sort of multiple employer plans. I love this provision. This is actually one of my favorite provisions. And this is coming up in 2024. And it sort of kind of technically is available today. So the history behind this, for those of you that say this kind of sounds familiar, is there was an entity named Abbott Labs who applied for a private letter ruling and saying, we want to help our younger employees out who are graduating with huge student debt. And because they have such huge student debt, they are not able to participate in the 401k plan. And so we want to be able to give them a retirement start. We want to, quote, match their student loans. The challenge is that you can't match something that's outside of the plan. There is a rule that actually restricts it. So the way Abbott Labs got around it is they funded what's called a QNIC, a qualified non-elective contribution. So it's kind of like an employer profit sharing, but you're only giving it to a targeted group of people. And you can only give it to the non-highly people. And that was great. Well, everyone thought that was just a wonderful idea. And so Congress embraced it. And so they have formally created a true matching contribution. So they've changed the code that normally would have prevented this. So if you have employees that are coming out of undergrad or grad school with massive debt, and they're telling you they cannot participate in the plan because they're just paying too much in student loans. As an employer, you may elect, and this is an election, this is a may provision, this is not a must provision. The employer may allow the student to submit something about their student loans. Hey, this is how much here's an invoice, here's how much I paid on my student loan. And the employer then can go ahead and contribute an employer matching contribution to the plan on behalf of that student. So it would count for calculation purposes as if it were elective deferrals. So if they are paying student loans up to 10% of their total salary, you would consider it as if it were 10% of elective deferrals, and you would calculate the match accordingly. What's nice about this versus the Abbott Lab situation is that QNECs are 100% vested. Whereas in this situation, under the new law, the matching contribution is like every other match. It's subject to vesting. It's subject to all the other restrictions on a normal vesting schedule. So if you're an employer and you happen to have this type of employee group, this is a great opportunity for you to show your employees that you really care about their ability to save for retirement and encourage them to be a part of the plan. So once they pay off their student loans, they are more likely to go ahead and sign up for the deferrals. So we think it is just great.
Allison,
Testing. Yeah.
I was going to say, Allison, on this one real quick, for the, I think you're getting into this with the testing. Is that for highly comps as well as non-highly comps?
It is for highly comps as well as non-highly comps. So again, unlike the Abbott Labs, this could be for, so if the son of the owner is paying off student loans because he wanted his kid to, make his way in the world and pay off his own loans, Sonny Boy can absolutely participate if the plan allows for this. So for purposes of coverage testing, you still count as benefiting. So employees without loans are not going to cause this feature to fail. So we have excluded that from 410B. We can go ahead and treat it as deferral for purposes of the plan, which means that it is really great. We can do a separate ADP test. We can do all kinds of creative stuff. Now, keep in mind, we need some more guidance on this, but it sounds like they're really committed to making this a super friendly provision and to help encourage folks to want to adopt it. But again, it is not mandatory. It's just something that based on your employee base, you may find this could entice some really good talent coming out of undergrad or grad school if you're having a hard time recruiting. So it's something to think of.
Okay. With that, everyone, there is looks like we're getting some questions in. So there's a question box if you guys would like to ask some questions. There's one question I'll ask right now, but we're going to try to save as many questions to the end. But someone did ask questions, matching student loan repayments. Have you heard of any vendors coming up with a solution on tracking of who is paying back the student loans? I'm thinking from an administrative burden perspective, Allison, but have you heard of anything on this?
There are, yes, because I worked with a number of companies that after the Abbott Labs things went through, they were like, sign me up. And they went ahead and put in that type of program into their plans, modeling it after the Abbott thing. And in the course of that, I came across, there are a couple of companies that are out there that do track the student loan repayments for you that had some pretty spiffy software that I looked at a few years ago. So there are companies out there. I guarantee you're going to be hearing more and more. They are so excited. They're going to be advertising this big time in the coming year. So they already do exist. But remember, you can rely on employee self-certification. So you can have a form where the employee signs off and says, I paid the student loans. Here's a printout from my loan company if the employer wants to require even the printout. And, they can use that. So the employer is not obligated to go into Sally Bay or, wherever and try and get proof. They can get the employee, if they want the matching contribution, to submit the data. So again, self-certification is going to make it much easier, but I do know there's some really spiffy programs that can help with this. Okay. We'll move on so we can get through the rest of the material because there's a lot of information that we need to cover. Long-term part-time. So this concept came out with the original Secure 1.0. It hasn't even fully taken effect yet. And Congress said, oh, no, we've got to monkey with it. Really not a good idea in my humble opinion. Nobody in Congress asked me, but you should have just left it alone, let us figure it out, and then we could deal with the new version. The crucial thing that they changed is instead of 3 consecutive years as a long-term part-time, they reduced it to only 2 2 consecutive years of people. And a long-term part-time person is somebody who works over 500 but less than 1,000 and therefore may be excluded from your plan. If your plan is designed with 3 months of service, this is not relevant for you because you're already including these people in your plan. If you're using 6 months and 500 hours, this may apply to you, or certainly if you're using the 1 year, 1,000 hours. The idea is that we want these long-term part-time folks to have the ability to defer. They do not have to receive employer contributions, okay? Here's one of those areas, though, where it's been over 3 years. We do not have guidance from the IRS on how we're supposed to administer a lot of these provisions. So it is exceptionally, exceptionally difficult to imagine that we're going to be able to start doing this in a mere 11 months and 1 week. But a lot can happen in the next 11 months and 1 week. Who knows? Maybe they'll finally give us all the guidance that we need on this. So years before 2021 are disregarded for vesting. If you're not giving them employer money, this is not relevant and we don't care. If you are going to give them employer money, I kind of like shrug my shoulders and say, well, if you're going to bring them into the plan anyway, why would you want to bring them into the plan under this provision? Why not just bring them in because eligibility is reduced? The reason that's important, and this is also one of those areas that we don't have guidance under, is that for purposes of vesting, if somebody is being brought in as a long-term part-time as opposed to just being brought in as an eligible employee, vesting is only calculated using 500 hours of service per year as opposed to 1,000 hours of service, which means I could accrue a lot more vesting as a long-term part-time than if I were just a regular eligible employee. My recommendation with this nonsense at all is you should sit down with Compass. You should discuss your plan design, figure out whether this applies to you or doesn't apply to you. If you have any of these long-term part-time folks that you're concerned about, and you should try to design around this rather than try and embrace it. And if you do not want to bring these people in your plan, you really like your 1 year and 1,000 hours because that's your demographic, do not include them for employer contributions because that is going to make a ginormous mess. I'm just telling you now. They did fix the technical problem of the top-heavy issue because the thing that people brought up is there's a rule, and I don't want to get too granular with you, but there's a rule where if you're a safe harbor plan, so I have safe harbor match and I have deferrals and I have nothing else, you are exempt from top heavy, and that is a big plus. If the long-term part-time people are not going to get the safe harbor because we're not letting them, we're only letting them defer, the way it was written is those people would have to get a top-heavy contribution, and that was very onerous. They fixed it. So now we don't have to give them anything, even if the plan is top-heavy, if it is a safe harbor, which is great. Here's where this becomes an absolute nightmare and why it's better to design around these rules rather than embrace these rules, again, in my humble opinion, is because if starting 1/1/2024, the Secure 1 rules have not been wiped out, they still apply. So as a result, as of 1/1/2024, we still are going to kick it in. It's going to have a 3-year eligibility. It's going to be under all of the original Secure rules. The only thing is the vesting and the top-heavy technical corrections overrode the original Secure 1. So there is going to be some administrative hassle here. All the new rules surrounding LTPT doesn't kick in until 2025. Again, we still don't have any guidance, so it's all still a little bit TBD. But this is a discussion item that you should start having because 2024, like I said, is 11 months away. So you want to sit down with your TPA, you want to sit down with your folks at Compass, and you want to see how this is going to affect you. Employee certification for hardships. This is effective today. This was like the first thing on my list for 2023 effectives. This was originally permitted in the legislation that kicked in back in 2019, that employees can self-certify that they have immediate and heavy financial need. They qualify for a hardship. When you do that, you have to have self-certification forms that explain what they're certifying, that goes into a certain amount of detail. If you don't have those forms, let Compass know you need to do it. You do not need to do this. If you are an employer and you don't trust your employees, separate conversation. We're not going to go there. You may want to still do the old-fashioned method, which is they need to show me their proof of hardship. Entirely up to you. If, however, you decide that you want to go with self-certification because you do not want to be in the business of trying to decide whether a mobile home constitutes a primary residence, it does, by the way, you can let people self-certify. Now, what part of what this addresses is the fact that there were concerns and people complained that what do you do when you know your employee is not telling the truth? And what this says is we are going to, without any fiduciary repercussions, allow the employer to say, I know this is not true. You cannot bury 7 grandparents in a single year. I know that this is a misrepresentation. I heard you in the lunchroom saying that you're buying a boat and ha, ha, ha. You can still deny the hardship request. And that was a technical detail that people weren't sure of. So again, this is just more if you want to do it. They also allow, if you're in the 403B world, guess what? You get to start having 403B hardship distributions, just like 401k. It opens it up to all the different types of money source. There's no requirement to take loans first. They've been really, really working on trying to get 403B plans more in alignment with 401k on these type of administrative issues. The catch, though, if you look at the effective date isn't until 2024. Why? Because they have no language on how this is supposed to be done. So this is something the IRS is going to have to work on. Another wonderful thing, and this is coming up in 2024, but we do need a great deal of guidance on this. So don't be surprised if that date gets pushed a little bit. One of the important things that came out of pandemic is the fact that there are many Americans who do not have even the most basic amounts of money to handle emergencies. You come home from work, your entire first floor of your house is covered in water because your water heater committed suicide. It happens, and it's $1,500 to replace a water heater and deal with it. Maybe your homeowner's insurance covers it, maybe it doesn't. But many people don't have that money, and they've had to resort to credit cards if they even have the credit cards. What they are now allowing plans to have, and again, note it's plans can set up, or you could say plans may set up. This is not mandatory. You do not have to allow this. I think from a compassion and empathy standpoint, it is a good thing to have. You can allow your non-highly compensated employees, folks that may struggle with being able to have that money to fix the water heater, you can allow them on an after-tax Roth basis to put money into a special account only up to $2,500. That's it, just $2,500. So if they put in $5 a paycheck and it takes them forever to reach that amount, that's fine. But at least it gives them an automatic savings mechanism where it goes from their paycheck straight into the retirement plan. And this particular, so record keeping is going to have to create a new money source for this. It's going to have to be separated. If they go over the 2,500, great for them, in which case we're allowed to treat it as Roth deferrals and we can move it to a different bucket. We can go ahead and just say, yeah, you're cut off. There's many things that we can do to cap this out. So there's going to have to be some coordination with payroll companies as well. We know that there's going to have to be a little bit of programming done. But the best part about this is, if somebody becomes an HCE, great. They can still have that bucket. They can still make withdrawals. It is, again, designed for the lower paid folks. The plan can establish eligibility. So it's not like day one of employment, they can start contributing. If they can't contribute to the 401k until 6 months, you can put a restriction on this for 6 months, or you may go in the opposite direction and let them in sooner. The reason this is so different and so great is that it is a tax-free withdrawal. So when their water heater blows up, they can withdraw the money that they have from this emergency savings account to help cover that emergency. They have to replace their tires, their transmission, whatever it is. And the participant is the one that has complete discretion. The employer does not have to question it. You don't have to see the receipt for the water heater. You don't have to see the pictures of the water on the floor. They come in, they say, I've had an emergency. I need $400. Boom. They fill out the paperwork. They just get the $400. Record keepers may not love this part, but they are not allowed to charge a fee for the first 4 withdrawals. So again, we want this designed to be an emergency savings, not a checking account. So they get 4 withdrawals a year free to cover emergencies that may arise in their life. But then after the 4th, then there is a reasonable fee that can be attached to this. Please don't ask me about how do we report this on a 1099? Do not know. No guidance. Remember, this legislation is less than 30 days old. I don't think the IRS themselves have a clue as to how they want to handle this. But from a conceptual level, I think it's a great opportunity. There is one other emergency savings type of provision that we're going to cover today as well. This one is more complicated, yes. But again, when you think about people that struggle to, they live paycheck to paycheck, this could be the difference between them being able to get to work or, let their kid pay a medical bill or, hey, I want to play high school soccer. Newsflash, that's not free anymore. These are things that count as emergencies. So there's no minimum balance.
Allison,
Yeah.
I was going to say, is it, I'm assuming it's $2,500 a year, correct? Or is it per
$2,500 is the max that account can hold, actually. And so the goal is that, once they contribute $2,500, then that account gets frozen. Now they pay down that account because they withdraw it for emergencies. Then they get to put more money into the account. But all of these details, guidance, my friend, we all need guidance on this. We don't have the details on this. So again, here's what we know in pieces. What I have in the bullets is basically translated into English from what we do have. Everything that is not on the slide means that I don't know. So I know that there's going to be an annual disclosure. I know that the document has to have language. Don't know what that language is. But if somebody is going to elect this when it comes available, we need to track it. So in 2025, we can amend to make sure that we include it into the plan document. Investment, it can go, again, all we know, it can be an interest-bearing account. It can be, just put into a conservative QDIA, but we don't have details. DOL is going to have to weigh in on this. So we're not sure exactly, but the goal is not to be aggressive and put it in, tech funds and stuff, because this is not retirement. This is emergency savings. So we want to preserve capital and keep it, in a pretty conservative position. What's interesting is they did say that if somebody can only contribute emergency savings, let's say somebody says, I can only put $10 a week, a paycheck into the plan. I want to put it into the ESA bucket, not into the 401k or the Roth 401k bucket. The employer would still have to match that amount, but the match would go like every other match. It would be subject to vesting. It'd be subject to testing, all of that good stuff. And again, it is not something you have to offer in your plan, but again, thinking of people who, really struggle when they have to replace tires. This is great. But why would anyone want to do this? My partner and I fight about this all the time. I think it's actually a great thing that I would encourage people. She says, but look at all these reasons. You're going to have to do separate accounting. You're going to have to, deal with lots of distributions. Record keepers, sorry, y'all make enough money. You can do this without charging. It changes the match, but not the ADP. Well, but we're not sure because we don't have guidance. It may be included in ADP. We don't know. We don't know how the 2,500 account limit is supposed to work. So a lot of the things that people have raised concerns about, I just have to say, let's wait and see what the guidance says, because this may not be as bad as possible. And if you try it and it turns out you did it for a year and it is making your life a miserable, time, you can withdraw it at any time. There is no anti-cutback. They specifically built that into the law so that you can pull the plug if you want to. I think, therefore, it is going to be worth people giving this a shot. I think they're going to see participants are very excited about this, and being able to save for these types of special occasions. Okay.
Allison.
Yep.
Just one more. I got another question on this, which I know you just kind of said you don't know all the answers on, so we're going to ask anyways on this.
Go ahead, ask it anyway, and then I'm going to mail you a dunce cap because you're not paying attention and I'm telling you I don't have any guidance. But go ahead.
Yeah. Someone said the 2,500 is that on top of the regular 401k limits? I know on the last slide you said the 2,500 you weren't sure what the max was.
It appears to be a completely, wholly unrelated to 402G limit.
Okay.
So in theory, if you're a non-highly, and let's just be real, if you're a non-highly compensated person and you have enough money that you can put away the full $20,000+ to deferrals, you probably don't need to worry about coming up with money to replace a tire on your car. Okay. The people that are going to be needing this account are people that have challenges meeting life's basic needs. If they are probably the people that can't really make deferrals because then they can't get them back out when they have those episodes. So this is a way for people to at least put a little money aside. And again, by having it done through payroll, deferral, even though it's after that, I call it deferral, it's more likely that they're going to get savings, because how many of us have the discipline every paycheck to manually go to our bank account or program it into our bank account so that we move the money over? Not many people have that much discipline. And there's whole sections of the population that they don't have the sophistication even to figure out how to do that, within their bank account system. So this is just, again, trying to address that portion of the population that really struggle. It's not designed to be I can make it like my HSA and I can save in this health thing and I can save here and really maximize. That's not these people. These people are making, they're here in Georgia, they're making $10 an hour. Sorry, I live in a state that has not raised minimum wage in a really long time, or less. And yes, a blown tire is the difference between being able to get to work and feed their family or not. So, just try to think outside of our very fortunate worlds and just think about these folks for a bit. Moving on to catch-ups, and we'll have guidance, trust me, and we will have follow-up webisodes as we get guidance so that we can answer these questions. But for now, I wish I had answers. I don't. Larger catch-ups. So they put in this, and this is going to be unique for payroll to figure this out. Apparently, if you are 60, 61, 62, or 63, you are allowed to do an extra little bump in your catch-up. So in addition to the regular catch-up, which kicks in at age 50, as you approach even closer to retirement age, you are allowed to bump your catch-up amount even further. So based on the current 2023 limit, you could, in theory, put in $11,250 as your catch-up as opposed to the $7,500. Does not apply until 2025. Don't get all excited about it. Here is the other thing about catch-ups, and this is one of the items that gets misconstrued in the headline. So I want to make sure it is not all catch-ups have to be Roth. It applies to participants that are essentially highly compensated employees. So and the way it's written, there is one, people are saying, oh, but if you read the language, it potentially excludes people who are self-employed. I have a feeling that by 2024, they will figure that out and they will issue a technical correction. The goal is I can put in on a pre-tax basis Marvy-Darvy regular deferrals up to the limit, but as a highly compensated, I now have to switch over to Roth. Why are they doing this, kids? The answer is it's a fundraiser. It's a fundraiser. You are getting people now that are going to be paying taxes on their catch-up amount that normally wouldn't be paying their taxes on. And that is going to fund some of the other provisions that are in this Secure 2.0. You can't pay things and then not collect revenues. This does not apply to SARSEPs or Simples because they, it's just not going to be, their limits are not going to apply for this. So again, this is not going to kick in until 2024. We don't have guidance. We don't have maybe a technical correction for self-employed folks. But again, it doesn't apply to rank and file employees, just the folks that are above the 145,000, which will eventually get indexed. So the eligible participant has the 402G limit for catch-up. And when you add it together, well, guess what? Now, instead of just kicking amounts out, we may be able to reclassify. And when we reclassify, we may have to make it Roth. So they're already thinking ahead as to how we're going to handle 402G violations. What I think is interesting is they haven't fully addressed what happens if I have to reclassify money because I fail ADP testing and it becomes catch-up when I previously didn't have catch-up. Do I also now have to reclassify that as Roth? And this is where I say to myself, like I said to Seth, let me put a dunce cap on my own head and say, sit down and have a piece of chocolate because we don't have guidance yet. So chill. All of these answers and more will eventually come to us, but the questions you can't help, they swirl in your head. Cash out limits. We have not increased the cash out limit since 1997. Currently, that cash out limit is $5,000 when you're forcing people over to that IRA. We are increasing it to $7,000. Woohoo! So we can kick some dead wood out of our plan, which is great, especially if you're a plan that's right on that border of, hey, I'm almost large enough to be an audit size because I have all these terminated people. This may be an opportunity to get rid of some of the terminated people. I will take this moment to say this as well. If you have not been forcing your terminated people out of the plan under the existing cash out limits, you are in operational failure in violation of your plan terms. You are legally required to do it at least on an annual basis. So you might want to check your procedures and see what you're doing with this. So this is going to apply for 1/1/2024. So as of 1/1/2024, it's a good idea to take a look at your participant balances, who has termination dates, how much they have. Talk to your folks at Compass about, hey, does this make sense for me to go ahead and amend my plan to allow for the force out rollovers? It's a good way to keep your participant count down. Another reason to keep your participant count down and get rid of your terminated folks besides the audit is every time you have to give people notices, you got to track these people down. And if they terminated in 2012, you are responsible for trying to keep track of their address every time they move. So keep your plan lean and trim. Get rid of your terminated people. You will thank me for that later. Increased RMD age. This is another one where we just with Secure 1.0 finally started doing the math correctly for age 72. Before that dust even settled, they said, oh no, we're going to be increasing it. So effective for 2023, this year, it moved up to age 73. And they built in that it's going up to 75 in 2033. So we already know where it's headed. Now, what's interesting about people born in 1959 is because, and this is another technical writing thing, if you thought Congress was perfect, I am so sorry to burst your bubble. They're not perfect. Look at the date of birth chart that's on this slide. If you're born January 1951 to December 31st, 1959, you fall into the 73 bucket. Now, if you read it and it says, if you were born after December 31st, 1958, it's based on age 75. What is that going to mean? There's a typo here. I suspect it was supposed to be born after 12/31/1959, but that's not what the law says. So we're not there yet. It's all safe and good. But in the meantime, know that this year it is age 73. So we did move that up. We also have another list of all kinds of optional. Please understand, all of this is optional. There's early distribution options for different folks. This one is another one that I just feel particularly strongly about. If there is somebody in your employ that is a victim of domestic abuse, and if they are brave enough to be able to break from their partner and come forward, they can come forward and self-certify that they or their child is the victim of abuse and that they're trying to get away from their abuser. They are allowed to take a distribution, which is the lesser of 10,000 or 50%. And they can go ahead and take that money and use it to flee the person that is abusing them. They are not going to be subject to any distribution penalties if they're under 59 and a half. They are able to repay it later on. It doesn't apply to DB or plans that have the QJSA, where annuities are the normal form. Why? Because in order to take a withdrawal from a defined benefit, cash balance, or money purchase plan, anything that has that mandatory annuity, you need spousal consent. And I don't think a victim of domestic abuse is going to be able to go to their spouse and take out this money and get their consent to do it. So it is restricted to basically your 401k type of plans. It is defined basically if there's any sort of physical, psychological, sexual, emotional, or economic abuse. And again, I know there's some people that say, oh, people are going to, take this out and they're going to lie. And, you need to learn more about domestic violence. For somebody to admit that they are a victim of domestic violence is generally an incredible act of bravery. It is something that is generally deeply, deeply shameful, especially for men. Men who are the subject of abuse, do not want to admit it. For a number of reasons. So again, this is something that as an employer, you don't have to put in your plan, but it does provide an out for people that are in a terrible situation. Okay, coming towards the end of this, let's talk about new plans. And again, this is 2024, so not the off distant shore. This is something that's coming up. We have no guidance. We're not going to get guidance for a while. If, let's say, you're an employer and you want to dip your toes into qualified plans, but you're not fully feeling it. Maybe you're in a state that is now going to mandate that an employer have a plan in place, or you have to join the state plan. They are now permitting deferral only 401k plans. This is like if a traditional 401k and a simple had a baby, this is what the baby would look like. So it's deferral only. There's no ADP testing. There's no top heavy. And the reason is because they cap out the deferrals at only $6,000. So they figure with a cap of $6,000, really the highly compensated aren't going to run too far amok. And the fact is that there's, just deferrals, no match, no profit sharing. It just allows your employees to save for retirement. You can have it apply to all eligible, but you can put in an age in service. You're allowed to exclude union and non-resident. Automatic enrollment is going to apply for this type of plan, again, there's always going to be a catch. And the employer can't have another qualified plan. The only exception to that is if you have union and non-union type plans, you can say, well, I have a union plan because I have to. This is what I'm going to do for my non-union people. So we do have some of that. And if you are involved in any type of merger or acquisition issue, there are coverage transition rules that will apply that allow you a buffer. This is from the land of stupid with two O's. They created a similar 403B version, which is just dumber than dumb, because a 403B plan already doesn't have to do any of the testing for ADP. It's not subject to top heavy. Why would anyone want this? And you're still subject to universal availability. So this is available. It's just pointless, and again, my humble opinion. But all the benefits that you get for the 401k don't apply. So I'm not really sure what they were thinking here, but at least they're thinking. Here's another great plus. I get this question a lot. I have a simple IRA, and I'm talking with my CPA mid-year. I'm talking with, my financial advisor, and they say, why are you doing this stupid simple thing where you could save so much more and have all these bells and whistles if you go to a traditional 401k? Under the current law, you can't do that because a simple has to be in place and be the exclusive plan for the entire plan year. Under the new law, you can absolutely convert, but the catch is it has to be a safe harbor 401k. So you're going to have a safe harbor match mid-year in order to get away from the simple. So just one of those things. Now, the deferral limit is prorated because, again, you're crossing over between the different plan types and the different limitations. We don't have a lot of guidance on this, but we kind of can guess at least how this is probably going to be administered. The one thing that they did catch, which is great from a technical perspective, is that under the rules for a simple IRA, you normally cannot take a distribution in the first 2 years of participation. You are restricted. Otherwise, you're subject to all kinds of penalties and taxes and things. On the other hand, if I terminate the simple IRA and I set up that safe harbor 401k, I can go ahead and allow my participants to roll from the simple over to the new plan. So again, we're not leaving people high and dry and kind of stuck out there in la la land, which I think is terrific. So these are just a sampling of some of the provisions. The things that we didn't talk about are either way, way far out there or not really hot items in this short period of time. And Seth, I said I'd try to leave 10 minutes for you to go through some questions. And I think I came close. I have eight minutes.
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Allison, for this. I think everyone on the call is finding this very helpful. It's always great to hear right from the attorney's mouth of the new regulations and how they are. I know there'll be a lot more to come. With that, I do see a few questions. So let me just read through some of these. So this one is, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's the emergency savings accounts. Do employees need to repay when they take a distribution? And can they take one every year, which you kind of addressed, but I guess maybe we want to.
They can take as many distributions as they want to. The first 4 distributions per year are free of charge. So if I want to go ahead and set that account up and I have a tire blowout in February, I've got my water heater go out in July, I have, a medical issue that happens in October, I could take 3 distributions in that year because, again, it's my money, it's after-tax money, and so they have no restrictions on that. And if they want to put money back in, they're just restricted to $2,500. So they're just constantly going to keep draining it and then bumping back up to the ceiling and then draining it and, see how that goes.
Yeah. Yep. No, I understand. Here's another question that came up. can parents who take loans on their child's behalf for obviously education, can they receive the match?
It appears so far from the language, and we are very TBD on guidance here. It appears that it has to be the employee himself who is repaying the student loans. So I don't think it's going to cover parents who borrow money on behalf of their child. But again, the guidance could say something different. I can tell you in the Abbott Labs PLR, it is specifically for the employee who has taken out the loan.
Okay, perfect. And it looks like we have one last question. If the plan does not offer a Roth provision, would that impact the plan as a whole for the non-highly comps, since the highly comp can't make a catch-up?
Well, that's going to be one of those language things. I understand the question. You look perplexed, Seth, but I get it. So the plan doesn't allow for Roth currently, but they allow for catch-ups. And so if I'm an HCE, I can only make the catch-up as Roth. So does that mean that as a result, the plan has to be amended to allow for Roth? Not necessarily. What there may be a provision that says, and again, we have to get the language and the guidance and what's going to be in this amendment, that they may only have Roth to the extent that they permit catch-up contributions. So they may not have ongoing payroll Roth, but only catch-up Roth. Otherwise, they may have to amend their plan to say, and if you fall into this HCE bucket under 145, you're not eligible to make catch-up contributions. Well, given that that's usually your executive suite, I don't think many employers are going to take that as an option. I think most people are going to add the Roth in at the bare minimum just to cover the catch-up contributions.
Perfect. Looks like there's one last question, and then we'll because we're coming close to the top of the hour. Says, what about 403B plans now being allowed to join PEPs? So
not
I think probably just your input
PEPs.
on that.
They can sponsor PEPs. They can embrace the PEP. Yes, they did a couple of really important 403B key legislative provisions. The first one is they said, MEPs and PEPs for everyone and fresh horses for the men. So 403Bs can absolutely now be a part of, can sponsor. The technical question that isn't answered in how they wrote the rule, which is going to pen the guidance, is can an entity like Compass be the PEP sponsor, but have the PEP still cover just 403B participating employers? It appears that that is what the intent is, because the goal and the congressional notes behind it is that they want 403B participants to be able to benefit from cheaper options than what they currently have. That's also why they put in Section 128 within secured. I know, it's so sad. I know the section numbers. That says that 403Bs can now participate in group trusts, the 8100, and it also kicked open the door for having a normal menu of mutual funds in a standard contract. That's going to require a little bit more language work on the securities side of the house. But we are going to see 403Bs, again, moving more and more into a 401k environment for investments and for plan structure, which is great. But don't look for that until 2024, 2025.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I think that will be a very big topic when it does become 2024, 2025. So
yeah, well, but isn't it so much better than being in those really expensive annuity type contracts where, the reason 403Bs are getting sued left and right for fee restrictions is because they're forced into these higher fee contract arrangements. And that's going to go away in the future, which I think is tremendous for those participants and plan sponsors.
Yeah. So, no, and I agree with you. I completely agree. Well, I know it's top of the hour, so we want to thank Allison again. Thank you, Allison, for your time. If you have any other questions, people, please feel free. Allison's contact information is right here. reach out to us here at Compass. We're always happy to help. And we'll be having another webisode in about another 3 months or so. We try to do one a quarter. Hope everyone has a great day, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Seth. Take care.